this thing and see what it'll do.
Ready to rock this, bro?
Oh, hell yeah. Check it out. Mayhem is coming back together. We got the fenders back on it. We got the front bumper. We got the valence. And of course, there's no more Hell Kitty. It's gone. It's in my backyard. But since the front clip was all done, we had moved on to the rear clip. And if you had been watching, the whole wheelhouse, both wheelhouses are done. No moss, no more work needs to be done to those wheelhouses. I finished. So, and that was a lot of work. Now I'm actually rear suspension today. I finished, or actually I didn't finish, but I mocked up my tubular shock tower brace so that way I can finish the geometry with the shocks and the brackets. And before I can finish all the geometry, I actually need to finish notching the leaf spring. See that notch right there? That is so it will allow the leaf spring slider to tuck up into the body more, which will then raise the axle more, and it'll get a lower stance because Mayhem wants to sit squatted, wants to tuck tire. All right, now we're going with the leaf spring sliders, these doohickeys right here, because that will allow the leaf spring to flatten out and go through its articulation a lot smoother than the old leaf spring shackles. Because as soon as the shackle starts to go backwards, it actually starts to bind up the leaf spring. So unless you have like super long shackles to allow the leaf spring to articulate good, no bueno. Sliders, mucho bueno. All right, well I need to finish welding up the notches I've done, and I got to brace it and add more and gusset it because I've actually cut about a third of the height of the frame rail away. So if I gusset it, it'll be stronger because technically the frame rails in B body Mopars and pretty much most Mopars through that era, except for some of the C bodies and everything. I mean, it's just sheet metal. They look like frame rails, they act like frame rails, but really, that's just sheet metal. A slightly thicker gauge of sheet metal. I think it's 16 gauge. 16 or 17, can't remember. Anyways, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish welding up these. I had to put a new spool of wire in the welder. That's what stopped me last night. And get to schmolting some metal. All right, time to work.
No matter how that ends, it's going to be amazing. Yeah. It will. Trajectory, acceleration, and a lot. A lot of luck. Here they come.
That was probably 500 pounds, something like that. Hopefully even a week with this. It has a game here. Don't be too hard to install. Put the bowl on. And because there's two cam bolts on both sides, they'll move the arms in and out, and also you can see it was never locked down.
Inside the General Mayhem yet again. Alright, I just finished installing the leaf spring sliders. They're actually not installed all the way, they're just tack welded because I wanted to make sure the leaf springs were the sliders were perfectly parallel with the leaf springs. So now that I know that this side and this side are all good, what I need to finish doing is I'm going to clean up this whole area and I'm going to put a gusset plate in there because I had cut some of the frame rail out. There's about 1.5 inches of the frame rail that was cut out. So, and we want the frame rail to retain its rigidity, so I made some gusset plates. I'm going to weld these right in there, and that'll help add some of the rigidity that maybe what I had cut out. But before I can weld that in there, I need to finish welding the leaf spring slider, and I need to weld through primer this side and that side because we don't want it to get all rusty and then pucker and swell out down the road. I've seen a lot, I mean, I've seen leaf springs pucker, swell out, and rot in half because of that. So, gonna do that, get on it. Man, I get my workout today because I have set the equivalent of one Rosie O'Donnell in the trunk of Mayhem, so that way I can get the car squatted down. I need to check pinion angle. So in order to check the pinion angle with leaf springs, you got to get the car squatted. Not only is one Rosie O'Donnell not enough, but I also had to strap it so that way I can get Freiberger's Mayhem to the ride height that he wants. So he wants this thing to tuck tire like 2 inches. So at the 2-inch tuck tire mark, 2-inch tuck tire mark, I have got the thing squatted down to where I can check pinion angle. One problem. There's no engine in the car, so I can't get driveline angle, but lucky enough, I have other charters, so I took the output shaft height from the bottom of the floor from one of my other cars, and I run a string from, actually you can see right here, I got a string right there that I took up to the front of the floorboard, hung it at the spot that it would be sitting for the output shaft. That gave me my driveline angle, so then I could actually check the comparison between the yoke and the driveline angle, and Mayhem does not have enough pinion angle for what it needs to do. So I can't even weld my lower shock mounts on because I don't have the shim plates. What I mean shim plates is I need 4 more degrees, and there's a 4-degree shim I could put underneath the axle, and that'll tilt the pinion down, and I need to tilt the pinion down before I weld the shock plate, the shock mounts on, because when I tilt the axle, that would also, let me get in here for a second. All right, I'm now inside the squatted Mayhem. So, I can't weld these on yet because if I tilt the axle, that will also tilt the lower shock mount, and I don't want to mess up the angle between the upper and the lower. So, sucks waiting for parts, but they should hopefully be here maybe today. I know I can weld my uppers on because I can just weld this one in the location it needs to be, but as for the lower, I have to wait till I get those shims. Once I get these guys welded up, I'm still waiting on a sway bar. I have no rear sway bar for this thing. I'm trying to get some help from some Nascar buddies I know and try and get a rear sway bar from one of the cup cars. That way I can put it in here just like Patina's is. But nothing so far. So if I can't do that, I don't want to put the trunk pan in it because then I won't be able to get in here like this and weld everything up. I'll have to do everything from the bottom, and that kind of sucks. But what I might be able to do is kind of mock up the trunk pan and get it all set in place, and then get it ready to weld in, but not weld in ready. I think I'm probably just going to do that. But I can do a few little things here. I can tack this up, I can pull it down, I can weld this all up, and then I just have to wait till the shock mount shows up, or the sway bar mount shows up. Alright, now that I got my upper and lower shock mounts tacked in place, now I can pull my shock tower out, and I can pull the axle out, put them on the bench, and TIG them all up. My welder's not really good enough to just MIG weld these brackets to the axle. I mean, it'd probably be fine, but I'd rather just TIG it. That way it's all pretty looking and like rainbowish and stuff. But yeah, I know this is like I left this extra long, but I'm just gonna cut that off, and then I'll just weld where I cut it. I'm not even gonna bother doing the other side. One, because I don't have the lower bracket yet. It hasn't showed up yet. But I got my pinion spacers in there, or my leaf spring shim plates in there. The pinion angle is not exactly where I want it to be. It's 4 degrees right now. I was really looking for 5 to 6. But by the time this car squats all the way down, and Freiberg is probably going to end up having to cut this bottom leaf spring off on the backside to allow this leaf spring to flatten out, and the car will tuck, the axle will tuck up to where he wants. So by the time he does all that, the pinion angle should be right in that 5 to 6 degree ballpark. Alright, so at least these are tacked. So then by pulling these off, I can just set this one to mimic that side. Alright. Look at that. There's something on Mayhem that has been 200 miles an hour before. Use Nascar parts. Make the best street car parts. So I'm working on the linkage. Actually, this is the adjustable linkage here. So I need to make brackets. I found these guys. They got the correct size hole. So I arched them for 3-inch diameter. I'm going to go ahead and cut these guys out, and then I can weld these to the front side of the axle. So that way the sway bar will be functional. Yeah. Then I gotta cut the back side of this bracket off. Then I can pull this whole assembly out because I just have it screwed in place. So I can pull it out and I'll TIG the whole thing up. Race car parts. Oh yeah, it's pretty looking. So I just finished the custom shock tower brace that I need to put into Mayhem, which actually also has the brackets for the NASCAR sway bar setup. Now that this is all TIG welded, which I really didn't have to TIG weld the whole thing, but it's just so much more fun to TIG weld because sparks aren't blown everywhere and stuff, and plus the welds look really pretty. But before I can weld it in, I need to copper paint the basically weld through primer. I just need to copper primer the inner frame rails, and then I need to copper primer the inside of the shock tower brace I made. That's a little hot. I don't want to touch that one. I can feel the heat radiant off that. Still cook hot dogs on that one. But I need to copper spray that side, so I'll let this thing cool off for a second, and then I can burn it in and MIG weld it because it's faster. All right, I'm gonna get on it. suspension in General Mayhem is done. It's all welded in, bolted together, donezo. So now I can move on to doing the trunk pans, which I can do trunk pans and a charger in my sleep. I've done so many of them. But I can do that in probably half the time it took me to do all of the rear suspension. Because there was a lot of angling and measuring and checking twice and 3 times and putting together, taking apart, putting together, tack welding, taking apart, then taking it all apart, fully welding, then so tons of work, all done, but it looks awesome and it will work awesome too. Race car status. See, we got a 600,000 inch bar, that's basically 6/10 of an inch bar, or 5/8. See, we even took the time to take it all together and make it all pretty looking. Oh, we got more over here. I didn't even use the stainless rod. I should have used the stainless rod. It would have made it really pretty looking, but it's just mild steel, so. All right. Well, all done. Now I can move on to the trunk pan. Issues on the trunk, just a few. So if you remember back when I wanted to keep the flange on the outside of the frame rail, which was the reason for narrowing the 3-inch wider wheelhouse to a 2-inch, because I didn't want to hack apart the flange on the frame rail. Well, that's making this a little difficult, but I've worked a way around it. So the only problem with it is I'm gonna have to double layer the trunk pan, because I can't just butt weld. See, this is a piece, actually let's go over here. This is a piece that I had sectioned out of the trunk. I had to cut 2 inches out of the trunk on both sides. So this is the piece that I had eventually trimmed down to fit the trunk. I can't just butt weld this right here. I would like to, but I can't, because there's frame rail. If I cut out what I'm wanting to, so I can butt weld that piece in, I'm going to lose from here all the way to about here. So I'll lose, yeah, like 12 inches of frame rail that won't be welded to the trunk pan. So I'll lose that boxing, because then the frame rail will just be a C channel instead of being completely boxed. So what I'm gonna have to do is just leave this like this, and then I'll have to weld this piece over it. But it'll be pretty clean. I'm not too worried about it. It's just a little more work, I guess. But I've already got the trunk pan marked out. What I do, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a silver marker that outlines all the skeleton of the frame rail. So that way when I pull the trunk, actually, yeah, right here, here's the strap that goes across the bottom. So when I pull the trunk pan back out, so I can drill all my holes in it, so I can plug weld it, that'll tell me where I can drill all my holes at. Well, I know what I need to do now. So now, yep, I just need to pull it out, start drilling and cutting. Alrighty. Progress. So the frame rails have all been epoxied. It's got a rust preventative epoxy inside the frame rails, and I've already weld through primered the tops of the frame rails and the flanges, because that's where I'm going to be plug welding. That's U-pole copper, And actually, that's what I have found to be the best weld-through primer you can buy. I've tried pretty much all of them. This works awesome. Getting ready to weld my trunk support strap in, and then I got to drill this sucker out. Spent a couple hours, actually about an hour, drilling and modifying this to fit in there. And then I can start burning it all in place. But it's done. Alright, so to keep ambers from burning my skin, going through my shirt, destroying my shirt. So I'm not wearing a really high dollar shirt right now. Actually, this is probably free. I'm gonna worry about it. Anyways, so to keep that from happening, I'm gonna go ahead and weld my gas tank strap supports to the bottom of the trunk pan outside the car. That way I'm not underneath it in the flames. Alright, once that's done, I believe, yeah. So that's all ready to go. Oh, I need to clean that real quick. Other than that, it's ready to drop in. So I will have the trunk pan in this car tonight. It may be screwed down. It won't be welded because, yeah, I'm about done for the night. So do what I gotta do here. Drop it in. Screwed down, because what I do is I screw down all the high spots. That way it sucks the pan down and you can weld up all the areas. You know, you don't want to hammer or dent or try and beat the trunk pan down, because then you get dents and it will never sit right. Because if you dent it downward, well, now the area surrounding that is up higher. So I'm guilty of that. That's why I've learned into doing this. So yeah, just take a bunch of self-tapping screws and washers and just screw down all the high areas, and what it'll end up doing is just sucking the whole trunk pan flat. See all those copper holes? That's where it's sitting perfectly flat, and then you just go in there and burn it up, because what you don't want to see is gap between your frame rail and your trunk pan. See how it all sits nice and flat now? Alright, well, I've got the whole thing screwed down, so now nothing left to do but turn on the welder and burn it in. Actually the side piece that connects to the inner wheelhouse. I'm making another filler piece because this is how much we widened the original wheelhouse. So that's 2 inches. That's a 2-inch filler piece right there. That's gonna go, I need to weld that in. And the reason I had to lay this on top of the trunk pan is because if you look over here, I didn't want to miss these spot welds right here. So I wanted to make sure I got these spot welds in, so that way the frame rails are boxed in, you know, not just a C-channel, but fully boxed in. So, and then I just weld this over it. But by the time I grind this weld down and then smooth it all out and everything, it'll look great. So, burn this in. but it does work.